I'm sorry. But I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful. But we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent. And all will be lost. All will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. And dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
Welcome, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm Clint Richardson, your host, and with me is a very special guest today, Mr. Walter Burien of CAFR1.com fame. Welcome to the show, Walter.
Good day to you, Mr. Clint Richardson. Glad to be here.
Well, it's always good to have you. Walter is, of course, what can I call him? A mentor, a teacher, who got me off of my collective buttocks and got me to spend years going over what's called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report to see the actual financial position of government. And boy, was I shocked. And glad to have gone down that road, actually. Now, I want to tell folks before we start that Walter has been trying to start what he calls a tax retirement fund for a very long time. And I want to explain to people why I support Walter, because as you know, my listeners certainly know, I don't support the system at all. I feel that it's corrupt beyond repair. Or I should say beyond fixing, or similar words. The one thing about Walter, and the reason why I acknowledge that Walter's system, what he has planned, if it can ever get off the ground, the one reason that I support Walter and only Walter, no other, politicians and their politicking, no other people out there, is because Walter actually acknowledges reality. And this is such a rarity nowadays that someone actually acknowledges reality, grasps onto it, and says, okay, here's reality. Now, how can we alter the rules of reality so that everybody benefits? All the people, all the investors, all the stock traders, all the government officials. Because, see, Walter acknowledges what the corruption actually is. Walter acknowledges what I refer to as the organized legal crime in government. And he says, okay, there it is. Now let's change the rules and actually acknowledge the corruption and just try to slide into a system where we can actually fix the rules. Not the system, but the rules.
And where everyone benefits.
Where everyone benefits. He wants to rid the world of taxation. For God's sake, we've got what we're going to talk about today is the stock market, derivatives, and all these different securities and investments. And the understanding, of course, that government is the main investor in all of that. And so we have all this massive investment scheme going on worldwide. It's now a global system. In fact, the rules of government accounting, the standards and practices, and GAAP, Government Accounting Standards Board, and all these things are all going into a more of an international state of being, and it's so, globalism is approaching. If we don't change this soon, we're going to lose control completely. So welcome to the show, Walter.
Thank you, Clint. And keep in mind, it's been going on for 5,000 years. I mean, if you go back to the time of the pharaohs, they had their slaves, they built their pyramids, and we'll feed you, give you a ration, but move the stone, build the pyramids, dig the ditches. The aspect of slavery has just transitioned in different phases over time. 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 300 years ago, 200 years ago. Now, with the inception of the country, when it started growing and it was wide open space and territory, and most people who come from Europe, they wanted to cut back on the ability of giving someone total reign over themselves. So, certain policies were put into play to hopefully give the public the upper hand. But as is the case, when you have massive money, massive wealth, and some very sharp players who want to control everything, including the population, it just has a habit of taking over, and becoming the prominent force, not just here, but anywhere in the world at any point in time and in history. Well, taxation is just simply an extortion racket, period. And, people have been brainwashed and conditioned. Well, government, they need taxation to survive. We want to pay our fair share. We want to support our government. And most don't even realize what they're saying or even the meaning of taxation. I made it a point several years ago. I would ask somebody, what is taxation? Well, that's what your government needs to... No. I said, no. What is taxation? It's what our government needs to operate. No. What is taxation? They were coming out with the soundbite conditioned responses, that they've been spoon-fed. And no one could answer.
And the answer is so simple, isn't it?
And the answer is so simple. All taxation is, period, is a revenue source, period. Okay? It's just like if you're operating your house, you have a job, working, to generate revenue to, pay your bills and pay for the house. You maybe have one or two or three investment accounts to generate revenue, to pay your bills and so forth. You may have a few side businesses, operating, which generates revenue to pay your bills and so forth. Now, on the taxation aspect, a misconception which has been spoon-fed to the public, they think government survives off of taxation. In other words, they're given the impression 100% of the revenue generated is coming in from taxation, and that is as far from the truth as you can get, and one of the biggest lies ever perpetrated on the entire population.
Are you suggesting, Walter, that paying taxes is not, after all, a patriotic duty?
Yeah, well, you're again, you parrot the paying taxes. Now, if you said paying revenue for government to operate, that's a more, apropos, so to say, expression. You're giving them money to operate, revenue. But just like in any other business or any other operation, you have to look at the revenue sources. Someone can give you money, you can work for your money, or you can invest to generate money. Now, government gets money from the population. The population gives them money. But government, over the last 70, 80 years, every year increasing their investment portfolios 3, 4, 5% a year, 3, 4, 5% a year. And, my favorite expression is there's only so many nickels in a dollar. Over the decades, government became the primary player in the markets. The stock market, the commodities and derivative market, the currency markets, both domestic and international, little bit by little bit by little bit more each and every year. Come 2000, if you actually add up government's investment income, it was great collectively, local government and federal government, enterprise operations, the whole 9 yards, government operations, brought in more from investment return than all taxation collected.
Oh, well, we're going to have to talk about what those investments actually are, and I've certainly covered this in depth. But we're going to take a break, and we'll be back with Walter Burien from CAFR1.com. Stay tuned.
First of all, let me take just a moment to thank you for allowing me back into your homes. If this is your first time with us, let me extend a personal invitation. Let's build a happy little cloud. Let's build some happy little trees. There are no limits here. You start out by believing here is in your world. You're the creator. Find freedom on this canvas.
Oh, we're in the Corporation Nation. We're talking to Walter Burien about that Corporation Nation, the inspiration for the show title and for my documentaries as well. Now, Walter, I want to quote you, and I know how strange it is to be quoted. I remember not too long ago, like looking at quotes that I've said and to be like, really? People are quoting me? That's so strange. But to quote the great Walter Burien, one of my favorite things you've ever really put forward is simple. It's so simple that you want to beat yourself on the head with it. You said that the easiest way to steal money from the population is simply to never allow the population to know the money existed in the first place.
Correct. The first time I was doing a show with George Norrie for about 2 hours, and I said, George, you know the easiest way I can steal $100,000 from you? His first response was, tax me. I said, no, there's a much easier way. He goes, what's that, Walter? And I said, if you didn't know you had it in the first place. That sunk in. And when the people are being so masterfully entertained into distraction, you know, this new thing going on or this happening, and the Wanta funds, the Nezra, this, that, and the other thing, Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, yeah, whatever. I mean, there's 50,000 different little distraction points.
It's okay because aliens will save us.
Yes, whatever. And, or the lizard people, who knows. But the bottom line is the public is being 100% diverted from the most fundamental basics that exist. How much money is their local government bringing in the first place? How much money are they sitting on that they've developed over 100 years, 150 years? What is their total gross income from all sources, taxation, investment income, enterprise income? Not a clue. I have thousands of phone calls coming in. I hear people rambling and, well, in 1962, this law was created back to 1958, and this was done, and blah, blah. You know, and I'm there, shish, you know, I'm sitting there, you know, just pulling my hair out, and I've learned to stop these people. You know, they go right on to, well, they control it all through the Bar Association, the Queen of England. I've learned to stop them. And I say, excuse me, I got a few questions for you. And they'll say, what? And I'll say, do you know how much cash you have in your pocket? And they'll say, yeah. Why do you want to know? And I said, I don't want to know. I just want to know if you know. And they say, yeah, I know. How much cash I have in my pocket? You know where your checking account balance is? Yeah. What about the value of your investments? Yeah, I have a pretty good idea. What about your net worth? Yeah, I know almost exactly what my net worth is. I said, good. And then I'll say, well, you know, they call me about their city, county, state, school district. I'll say city. Well, you called me about your city. How much cash they bring in last year? No idea. Take a guess. I can't. Why? Don't have a clue. What about their investments they're sitting on? No idea. Take a guess. I can't. Why? Don't have a clue. What about their approximate net worth? No idea. Take a guess. I can't. Why? Don't have a clue. And that's from everyone. Okay? And the bottom line is, what's basic and fundamental to each and every one of us, every day of our lives, since we're little kids, up until when we die, how much cash we have in our pocket, checking account balance, value of our investments, our approximate net worth, they have created an entire vacuum and void in the cognitive thinking of an entire population. I find it absolutely amazing they pulled that off. But then when you look at the money and the power and the control involved, that's why they focused on creating that vacuum and void so the public wouldn't have a clue. They'd be sitting off in la-la land.
What's really funny about this, even ironic, is that this is all being done behind the scenes, of course, but it's also being done on behalf of the people or for the people by the consent of the quote-unquote people. You hear it all the time, and yet people have no idea it's happening.
You know, it's, 15 years ago when I first started National Disclosure, I used to ask people, would you give your 14 and 15-year-old kid a carte blanche to write their own allowance check, and everyone would say, no way in hell, I would never do that. I bring to their attention that's exactly what we've done with government for the last 100 years. Give them carte blanche to write their own allowance check as we're masterfully entertained with what they're presenting us and for justification. And keep in mind what was spoon-fed the population for the last 65, 70 years. Our budget report is short of funds. We need to raise more money. And their budget report, a budget report is a projection for 1 year on a selective grouping of expenses. Okay? It has nothing to do with total cash gross receipts, total investments, your net worth. The report that has to do with your statement of net worth is the annual financial report. You know, anyone who bought stock in a company, Microsoft, AT&T, IBM, if you own one share, they send you a copy of their annual financial report each year. Government put one word on the beginning of their annual financial report to make a differentiation. They called theirs a comprehensive annual financial report. And it started in 1946, being promoted to all local governments, and by 1976, it became the standard across the country for cities, counties, school districts, states, enterprise operations, state universities, community colleges. In the last 25, 30 years, they were all completing a comprehensive annual financial report, or the statement of their worth showing their total gross income, total investment funds they were sitting on, enterprise operations, if they had them, and it was the whole picture, the holy grail of accounting. But along the line of the power game being played, not a mention, not a peep, to the entire population. They were the only ones who were excluded. Now, the syndicated media got sent the reports each and every year. Education, they got sent the reports each and every year. In fact, they produced their own reports, state universities, school districts, and so forth. Both political parties were sent copies each and every year. And, the wealth that was involved, especially the investment revenue building up, which was driving corporate projects, domestic and international, in tunes of hundreds of billions of dollars, players knew not to mention it. Not a word, not a mention, not a peep. Now, in 2008, I think it was, out of Oregon, Representative Hanna, who's the Speaker of the Oregon House, there's a 3-minute YouTube, which he put out by the Young Republicans of Oregon. Hanna stood up on the House floor, and he goes, everyone's citing a shortfall of revenue and money. What we're all being told is we have $500 million available to us to spend for the year.
On the budget.
On the budget, right? And he goes, what I have in my hand, he just had the cover page, is the State of Oregon Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Now, I want you to listen very closely here. In this report, which is audited, it shows $3.8 billion available, of which, I think it was 78% or something, undesignated, unreserved. They couldn't find a way to spend it. It's just sitting there. Not $500 million, but $3.2 billion. I'm going to email this to every one of you today. And you can see the other congressmen in the room. There's one guy in the front. You see this. He puts his hands up and his head shrinks down. And you see the look on his face. He goes, oh, my God, he's breaking the silence is golden rule. And then the older guy behind him with white hair, his eyes kind of perk up for a second. He goes, and he writes down the figures. That should have been seen by 10 million people in the first week.
It should.
Again, redacted. I mean, they blocked off the hits.
And again, you say that the major media companies, NBC, ABC, they all receive this report, and that's very important. We'll talk about that when we come back.
They know not to make a peep.
Oh, there's a solution. He's a rebel and a runner. He's a signal turning green. He's a restless young romantic, wants to run the big machine. He's got a problem with his poisons, but we'll find a cure.
folks, welcome back. I was just looking at some old posts that I've made, and again, since I've met Walter Burien, I spent a lot of time writing about my discoveries, personal discoveries, and understandings of how the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report shows things that most people could never imagine. And of course, as Walter was saying, taxation or revenue collection really has nothing to do with the day in and day out running of the background of government. All these investments. Now, one of the main, of course, investment schemes of government is the pension system, including Social Security and all of the other type of insurance and other schemes, as they actually officially call them. Yes, a pension is a scheme. So in 2009, I just happened to be writing down what the New York State pension system, retirement system had in certain media companies. And so I'm just going to read a few of them here now. Officially in 2009, and this is either increased or decreased, depending on, what they're doing, Walt Disney Company, which I believe is ABC as well, 7,975,404 shares of Walt Disney Company owned by the pension fund at a value of $144.8 million. News Corp, Class A shares, which is, of course, Fox News, 7.7 million shares at a value of $51 million. Time Warner Cable, about 6 million shares, a little over $100 million investment there. CBS Corporation, Class B shares, 3.5 million shares. General Electric Company, 39.5 million shares. These are ownership shares in General Electric at $399 million in actual market value. You have Sony, you have Vivendi, you have Discovery, you have Marvel.
Can I throw in one quick note there also, Clint?
Sure.
It's about 14 years ago. The Houston School District, Disney made a film which was kind of objectionable, not really a family-oriented film.
Disney, really?
Little racing. Disney did it, and the Houston School District made the announcement. We're very upset with Disney and making this type of film, and we're going to divest ourselves from our $42 million in Disney stock. And this was just the Houston School District. People said, what?
I know. They're like, what? That's like an admission all of a sudden. Where'd that come from?
Yeah, they didn't do that again.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and then on the New York State Retirement Fund, this is also about 12 years ago when they were hitting Microsoft up with divesting, and splitting apart. The New York manager goes, and we're going to stick behind Microsoft and our $121 million in 121 million shares. Our 121 million shares of Microsoft we're going to hang on to. And again, someone said, what? What?
What? Yeah. Hey, why don't we know about this? Why are we paying you taxes if you're investing in all these corporations? Just to give you another example, British Sky Broadcasting. I was just reading the domestic ones. British Sky Broadcasting, 3.6 million shares at $22 million in value. You've got the New York Times, you got Cinemark, you got the whole industry basically all in one pretty package. Now, as we mentioned earlier,
well, collectively owned. If you look at the collective.
Oh yeah, this is just for New York. Just New York.
They own them. Yeah. And you made a point on one of your radio shows I was listening to a couple months ago. You just kind of you made a very good point, and you didn't carry through on it. And it was so important. I caught it, and it was so important. You were talking about government pension funds, and you mentioned, well, how come we're not paying the employees of Bear Stearns, their pension funds also? And, when you said that just lit up all the bulbs, as far as an obvious point. Why are we paying the pension funds of government employees, both local and federal? And any government employee listening right now will say, oh, my God. He can't say that. I mean, they've been getting the gravy ride for 100 years.
Yeah.
I mean, if we were working for Apple or Microsoft, how come the public's not paying for our pension funds? Or J.P. Morgan Chase, how come the people aren't paying for our pension funds? A city, a county, or a state, their employees are working for us, supposedly, right? And, the equation of, well, let's also pay their pension funds, I just don't. They're making good pay, and just like anybody else, working for Apple, Microsoft, or Johnson & Johnson, they pitch into their pension funds, and they pay for the pension funds. The company may pitch in a little bit sometimes, and then on the government's position, well, school teachers get paid very little, and we should be paying into their pension funds. And the big point is, okay, they're making a blanket statement there, and the public goes, oh, the school teachers, they're paid very little. We have to, let's say this, okay? If a government employee is making $45,000 a year or more, they pay for their own. If they're making less than $45,000 a year, then we subsidize them and pay into help them out with their pension funds. But, if you saw Bell, California 2 years ago, was in the news, they arrested the city manager for paying himself $1.6 million. And his pension fund was all set to get paid $1.2 million a year. Okay? Now, what I thought was absolutely humorous, the FBI got involved, and the chief of police and several officers went out and arrested the city manager. Okay? Well, I pulled up the annual financial report for Bell, and it was kind of like a suburbs, and they only had 21 employees, 16 of them being police officers. The chief of police. Now, the police officers are making $165,000 a year. And I said, damn, I want to be a cop in the city of Bell. Plus they got all their benefits, retirements, and everything else. Now, the chief of police, okay, who went out and arrested the city manager for paying himself $1.6 million or whatever it was, okay, he was making $645,000 a year. Okay, now the following year, he ended up getting indicted and arrested also. I guess from the cops, help that were getting $165,000 a year. Well, and the public is sitting there off in La La Land being masterfully entertained. No one ever looks at the basics or the fundamentals, so it gives these guys carte blanche to do whatever they want to do.
I think it's important to state here, one of the things, when I first met Walter, I had the misunderstanding that Walter, when he was talking about how to fix this thing, was to take the pension fund monies and redivert it to something else, and I was mistaken. Now, what's important about this concept, because what's really happening is taxpayers are funding the pensions, okay? And that taxpayer money, which we call matching funds, which in turn, like judges, for instance, have non-contributory funds where they don't pay a cent. It's all taxpayer funded. Taxpayers pay the entire pension payments into judges' funds. Employees will pay some, and the taxpayers will pay double, triple, or quadruple what all the employees are paying.
Now, Clint qualify. I got hundreds of pension funds. You total up a few of them. If you looked at all, the large and the small collectively, which are several, tens of thousands collectively, large and small, give the public, a rough guesstimate as to the collective total that has been put aside from taxpayer funds.
Well, I'm certainly not qualified to do that, but you've certainly done it in the past.
The top 200, okay, that figures, what they want to, I told people it was about $21 to $24 trillion.
Yeah.
Okay. And, attorneys are running the whole show. So there was one attorney who comes out and he goes, oh, that's not true. Look, here's the top 100 or 200 pension funds. Top 200, and they only have 4.5 trillion?
Yeah, something like.
Yeah, and they only have 4.5. That 26 trillion is total. And again, selected presentation. The top 200, large chunk, but now let's add up the 20,000 separate individual city, county, state that do not participate with the system, large system retirement funds. When you add up the collective, it gets way up there. Okay, and keep in mind, with that kind of revenue, gives you the ability to take over corporations, industry groups, both domestic and international. What happened, Clint, the first time you looked? I directed you to a CAFR that listed the international holdings. How far did your drop open? When you
and I do that to people all the time. I said, look, if you want to understand what's going on, my jaw was like hit the floor. I couldn't believe. And it really was what kicked me into motion to want to learn more when I understood then that government, for instance, China, the biggest fallacy there is, when you look at the investments of our government, especially in the pension fund, into China, and then you say we owe China or China holds our debt, you realize, no, actually it's the corporations over there that are funding it. We'll be back, folks. Stay tuned.
Scientists have been battling to understand what this unappealing object is all about. What the object is all about.
Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems in the form of energy.
Okay, folks, welcome back.
And then it explodes into
We're talking to Walter Burien today, CAFR1 at CAFR1.com, where you can find all kinds of good information, including the documentary that Walter and I assisted anyway in helping Walter put together his documentary, and it was the biggest game in town.
The only game in town. The only game in town. First cut. The final cut will be when we're launching on the GRFA, and about 15 minutes extra added on regarding that progress and it taking place.
Yeah. So these pension funds, it's important, I think, to understand, and people don't want to think this way, but unfortunately, it's how you need to think. Now, we've noticed that there's a real redundancy in government.
Let's give a new name to government pension funds. We'll call them power bases. These power bases.
Sure. And when you combine all those power bases together and you put the voting power through proxy shareholder votes.
You have the biggest monopoly on the face of the earth.
Absolutely. And that includes not just the United States. I've looked at Canada. I've looked at Ireland. I've looked at England to see all of their investments in the same company. So I'm assuming that they're all basically in on this for the most part.
You were mentioning China when we went on commercial break, and just one little pointer there. You know, in 99, 2000, probably about 3.5 trillion, trillion, into the Chinese economy, businesses, manufacturing, and so forth. And then we opened up the floodgates of Chinese goods coming into the U.S., so anything you picked up in Walmart and Kmart said made in China. And people, oh my God, we're losing U.S. jobs, and look at the trade deficit, 50, 60 billion a month, oh my God. You know, and the general population's cognitive thinking was, these Chinese are taking all of our jobs. Cheap labor. What the 1 + 1 = 2 equation that didn't register in the brains of the population was collective government from the U.S. had targeted for investment main corporations and companies in China, and then all of these orders, manufacturing orders that were taking advantage of the cheap labor in China, were directed towards the companies U.S. local and federal government collectively owned. So who were making the 600,000% profits on this flood of Chinese goods coming into the United States?
Wasn't China.
Our own government.
Well, now you were telling me also that companies like Hershey and other companies were actually literally threatened and forced to close. Like where you got the Hershey.
They were forced to move their manufacturing plant to Mexico instead of Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and the guys.
It was done so by collective government exercising their proxy votes on stock ownership.
So people have the mistaken identity crisis that they say, well, Bill Gates is the head of Microsoft. He makes all the decisions. Is that true, Walter?
No, the shareholders are going to influence what it does. So when you have collectively government owning the majority of the shares who can now exercise proxy votes through private associations, they're now all members with controlling interests. And just a note when you mentioned Bill Gates, San Diego County, not San Diego, Los Angeles County. A couple of years ago, Los Angeles City, we're close to bankruptcy, and da-da-da-da. I pulled up their CAFR on the city, they had about $115 billion. Then I pulled up the county's CAFR, They're sitting on close to $235 billion, and their normal operating budget was $17.5 billion a year. That's, damn! I'm sure 99.9% of the public doesn't know that the county of Los Angeles had a normal operating. This is 2007, by the way, of 17.5. Big bubble burst hit and the housing market, and they said, "Oh, bankruptcy, we're going to pull in our belt." Da, da, da. Yeah, well, come 2012, 4 years later, you would think their budget stayed pretty flatlined, didn't increase that much. Well, actually, it went up to $25.8 billion, or a 48% increase when they said they were pulling in their belt. Now, if that's not in your face, I don't know what else is. But here's a major point. Los Angeles County, the local governments in Los Angeles County, the multiple cities, school districts, enterprise operations, townships, and so forth, each are individual and each have their own investments. If you added up the collective from Los Angeles County, total investments held by all local governments in the county with the county was about $1.8 trillion, keyword, dollars. Now, if you took Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, 30 of the richest guys in this country, their entire net worth, okay, would not even come close to Los Angeles County.
Yeah. Period.
And let that sink in. Okay?
And that's investment wealth. Investment wealth. Remember that.
Correct. And, so the public, keep in mind, here is the most important issue facing the entire population of the country. Okay, everything else is masterful distraction. As you know, I know, neighbor knows, your wife or your husband knows, wealth is one of the most important things you look after and you kind of try to protect. And here we have our collective government sitting on more wealth than we can possibly even imagine as they cry poverty and broke, giving selective presentation. Okay, and they've created a vacuum and a void in the cognitive thinking of the population, and they have the full, and let me repeat this, the full 100% cooperation of the syndicated media, controlled education, and both political parties for not a peep, mention, or word of the collective investment totals or even the comprehensive annual financial report, the Holy Grail accounting for government, similar to the Bible for the Catholic Church. And you have to let that really register solid in your brain. The degree of the cooperative effort of thousands, tens of thousands of players to make sure you stay clueless due to the wealth and the money involved. And that collective control of that wealth. Very important. It's like being married to your husband or your wife for 35 years, thinking that she has a $10,000 a year job, or he has a $10,000 a year job, and you find out the person is sitting on $40 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, at first you're not going to believe it. And then you look and you say, damn, how is this possible?
You mentioned...
not a mention, not a word for 25, 30 years. I mean,
sure, and nobody's looking. You mentioned the Bible. And the comparison of the CAFR as the Holy Grail really is the Bible of government accounting, and that's a
Correct.
very good analogy.
And
explain that.
On break, I mentioned one little analogy regarding the Bible. Picture if, the Catholic Church basically formed 200, 300 A.D. Well, picture when they were forming, they found that Bible had hidden messages in the passages. Okay, clues and code leading to massive wealth buried all over the world and hidden all over the world. And they go, oh my God, this is a very valuable. And the Bible, they get it as an internal document to themselves because of the wealth involved. Now, jump ahead to the present, okay, and say, for example, I was talking to a Christian, a Catholic. And, the Catholic Church never mentioned the Bible. And I said to the person, would you like to see a copy of the Bible? They would look back at me and say, Bible? What's that? Well, that's kind of what your entire religion is based on. Want to see a copy? And I handed him a copy of the Bible. And he flicked through the pages, looked for a little bit, and he goes, What's this have to do with my religion? I see names like Peter, Paul, Simon, Jesus, Mary. Who are these people? What do they have to do with my religion? They wouldn't know, because it was never mentioned, never talked about, never discussed, always shied from, misdirected away from. Even if somebody in a Catholic church during service said, "Oh, I heard about the Bible. Why don't you talk about that?" Sir, I don't know what you're talking about. Please sit down. We're having services here. You can leave. You want to disrupt. Let's say this is for everybody else.
The Catholic people are basically given a set of cliff notes, obfuscation and hiding everything in the cliff notes, which is basically the budget of the Bible.
And all they talked about at the Catholic Church was their monthly, bulletin. We have to read our monthly bulletin. This is very important. And never mentioned the Bible. I mean, that never happened, and, it does not happen, but the massive wealth wasn't involved as there was in the annual financial report in government. So
basically what we're saying is we got this big, massive report that's sitting there, basically not unknown per se, but basically unmentioned, untalked about. It sits there.
No one's ever directed to it by the syndicated media. Rush Limbaugh has had tens of thousands of calls and emails, trying to get him to mention the CAFR.
And he doesn't do it.
He has a 45-second time delay on his radio.
Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel. Who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us use that power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
Welcome, folks. Here, the second hour of the Corporation Nation here on RBN. My guest today is Walter Burien of CAFR1.com. That's CAFR #1.com. And, Walter, I wanted to just cover a few basics. Now, we've talked about the fact that government is basically, as far as the stock market goes, of course, the stock market was created and is regulated by government. And, of course, when you consider that government is the main investor in that market and it's regulating it, there is a severe conflict of interest that's going on.
Big bailouts in 2008, 2009, the public goes, why are they bailing out all these companies? Government wasn't bailing out the companies. Government was bailing out their own investment portfolios to keep themselves in the black.
Absolutely. Well, it is complicated because people don't know what's happening, unfortunately. But let me give you another example. Now, I was reading from the New York Pension Fund. Again, this was 2010 report. Again, you wonder who owns these banks. Wells Fargo, 16 million shares at a market value of 231. That's just the New York pension system. Bank of America, 23 million shares. Citigroup, 18 million shares. American Express, 4.2 million shares. Goldman Sachs, all these big, evil, bad companies that we think are controlling everything.
I'd like to qualify a misconception that's intentionally spoon-fed to the population.
Sure.
The population has been spoon-fed. Oh, corporations own government. The corporations control government. That is not true. It's in fact, an exact opposite scenario, but you're fed that so you won't cognitively think about the other direction.
Yeah.
Government collectively owns these corporations. Now, these corporations have a lot of influence with government because money invested with these corporations, they want to make sure their profits are protected. So the corporate leaders influence with government. the corporate leaders are constantly brown-nosing with government to get more capital, more bond money, and so forth. But, the golden rule is the gold makes the rule. So you have government owning the majority of these corporations, banks, brokerage houses, insurance companies. So technically, government is the strongest influence peddler and the strongest strong arm.
Well, logically...
And look at Russia. I mean, because I grew up in this country being briefed and spoon-fed how Russia was bad and this because they controlled and owned everything. And technically, here in this country, government controls and owns everything, including your house, your property, through property taxes. You're a renter. The corporations, the media, the school districts, everything. Government owns everything. And, I like to qualify that. Do you ever wonder why Gorbachev went Democratic? He looked at the United States and said, hell, they're making 10 times more than we are, and they have more control than we do. Time to go Democratic.
Sure, and the people don't even know it's happening. That's the best part is the secrecy of it all.
Well, because Silence's golden rule is the whole game.
Yeah, well, again, logically and reasonably, to add to what you just stated, which is a very true statement, but logically and reasonably and factually, government doesn't have what's called ownership shares. Only private corporations do. And once you put your corporation up for private, as a publicly traded corporation, you do your IPO, whatever, that's when government comes in and grabs everything. Yeah, the people can get a little bite here and there, but for the most part, any corporation that goes public, and if you pretty much have to if you're going to ever get anywhere, because you're not going to get anywhere through the wall of regulation that government is, because it owns the companies that'll be your competition. So government has and purchases and is easily verifiable that government has ownership shares. So we can say government owns the media, because it literally has shares in the media, but corporations
always qualify that over and over again with the aspect of collectively, because everybody keeps thinking, my city couldn't own that much, my state couldn't own that much. But when you think of the tens of thousands of local governments, cities, counties, school districts, enterprise operations, states, all separate, collectively, they own it all by investment.
Yeah. So important. And gosh, if anything, I wish I could get that across to people and really make it stick. I always offer the CalPERS report, which is very easy to find. CalPERS, if you just type in CalPERS asset list or asset holding list, you can generally find it. It's pretty simple. And you just go down and look. Every corporation in the world seems to be...
Yeah, another important point. Okay, a backdoor move government did to protect their butts from, exposure. You can't have, like, the city of New York saying, if we team up with all of our other local governments, let's call Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, the state of New York, and we'll get New Jersey in, all the cities in New Jersey, and we'll form one collective, and we'll take over everything with our massive investment wealth. Well, that'd be a little bit too and too big of a monopoly, showing of a monopoly. So the way they got around that through the back door was they now did get together, and what they did was they created their own private associations. And now they became members with the private associations, and then gave the private associations the authority to call the shots.
Yep.
So this way they could call the shots outside of their government operations, but control, do the same thing that they would have wanted to do as government itself. But it would have been kind of illegal for them to do so.
Let's talk about the stock market, because one of the weirdest times when I'm going through and researching after I met you and going and looking at all these things, seeing who owns what, and I'm looking and I find this. I'm sitting in a restaurant and they see this newspaper with this really bizarre New World Order type looking eye, and it's talking about the stock exchanges. And I'm looking, are you kidding me? I didn't even know that. I'm looking and it lists what the stock market is. What is the stock market? Nothing more than private corporations that are traded on the very markets that they represent. You got the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, or CME Group. You've got Deutsche Börse, or New York Stock Exchange Euronext. You've got Hong Kong exchanges. You've got BMF, which is the Brazilian mercantile and futures. These are all actually private corporations that we call a stock exchange, but they're traded and owned. Again, the major owner and controller of these is the very government who invests through these markets, controls the entire structure, rules, and regulations of those. I mean, it is one big monopoly joke on the people. That's the amazing thing about this.
Right, but they've done it, and they do it so well, and they control, I mean, the public. I used to be the national sales manager for the U.S. Trading Championship, U.S. Investing Championship, Money Managers Verified Ratings for about 10 years. And, 98% of the population loses all their money trading in the markets. And, the reality is the government institutional funds are the ones taking the majority of the money. And, but then you have the syndicated media and all these other groups promoting people to get involved. Oh, look at how much money you would have made doing this, and how quickly here and that. That you have to suck all the minnows in, and then you school the minnows, and then all the sharks feast. And the sharks are the collective government, super mega management funds.
And they're going to make money whether you win or lose. It doesn't matter the minnows win or lose.
No.
Wait. We got to go back. We got to go to break. We got to go to break. Stay tuned, folks.
No, they'll make sure the minnows
Is this real? Versus this ride? The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice.
All right, folks. We are back in the Corporation Nation. We're talking to Walter Burien of CAFR1.com, and we're kind of, like I said, I wanted to do a little, sort of a basic run around about what the stock market is, how it is manipulated and controlled, and of course, the fact that is very easily verifiable, and you'll hear it mentioned in the news and government news every once in a while, like we said, and people are like, huh? That government is the main, collectively, all the governments, the little governments, the big governments, the pension funds and everything else, are all the collective shareholders of these corporations. They, of course, then proxy vote, use their votes as shareholders to organize, reorganize, vote for mergers and acquisitions, and, of course, vote for board members. So, literally, government is the one electing the board members who, in turn, elect the presidents of the companies.
And a very important note, 1982, outsource their global fund management. They did it initially through CalPERS International, but they created multi-trillion-dollar investment funds, Germany, Switzerland, South America, all over the globe. They have assigned management funds, which they've moved money into. So not only do they control through the domestic markets, they have a massive amount of monies that they can come in through the back door, looking like private sector funds, coming in internationally to roll the markets one way or the other, and keep off the radar and doing.
Well, and that's a great point, because people will look and you'll see who the main shareholders are of a lot of these corporations. They'll say, well, wait a minute, I see that the Vanguard fund is the main investor or the highest shareholder. I'll see the
Credit Suisse,
all these different mutual funds. So what's the story behind that, Walter?
Well, if you actually looked at the fund, which you cannot get access to because it's fictional, and looked at who the participants are, you'll see that is probably the primary equity in those funds. Now, you can look through the back door as you go through the pension funds and start adding up collective totals into this international fund, that international fund, this money market fund. held globally, and you'll get a pretty good idea of the money flow going into these funds. And then when you think about collectively, you realize that most of these funds are primarily government investment funds. Now, even like Ginnie Mae, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, when they went under to a certain extent back in 2008, they were management companies, so they're on the exchange and their stock went down to nothing. But the stock was not the mortgages, the $6, $7, $8 trillion in mortgages, were the investments managed. Okay, they only took a dip of about 3%, 4%. But if you looked at those, $6, $7, $8 trillion in mortgages, who were the primary investors? Collective government, local and federal. And in fact, China even announced back then, we have $350 billion with Ginnie Mae. So government. So when they were bailing out Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae, and so forth, what they were doing was keeping them. They didn't want to go into the red. They kept themselves into the black by bailing them out. So the world of government finance is totally opposite of what the public perceives. And in fact, my favorite comment I hear from so many people, especially old timers, the government shouldn't be investing in the marketplace. I said, well, you're about 50 years behind the curve on that one. They've taken over the marketplace. They don't have a clue. I mean, because they were not intended to have a clue. I mean, for government to be able to do that, they have to make sure it's never discussed, never a cognitive thought brought out. Can you see your nightly news, ABC, CBS, NBC, saying, well, my listeners out there, I want you to start adding up the collective ownership of Microsoft, Apple, investments with Chase Bank, Wells Fargo, and get back to me, right? He'd find himself on the street so fast he wouldn't know what hit him.
Yeah, imagine like NBC saying, well, the collective ownership stockholders in Microsoft today, which are 76% institutional government holders.
Or our own company. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine, the news actually coming out and saying, government voted today to elect new board of directors for this company. They just wouldn't do it through their collective stockholdership and through their private associations. It's very sad. It's very sad. And yet, to be clear, Walter, each government, specifically individual government from the lowest to the highest, are all sending their CAFRs to the news stations, right?
Well, all the states, the school districts. When I first started looking back in '98 and found out about this, I cover Department of Treasury in New Jersey, who sent out the CAFR reports. I wanted who was sent to, and I thought on a list, small grouping of inside players. And read out to me who gets the report. Sir, this is way too long for me even to try to. And she started saying, well, there's 3 categories. Media, education, and general. Under general, senators, media was sent to ABC, CBS, NBC. And on ABC, NBC, and CBS, they said 117 reports went out to ABC, 87 to CBS, and so on and so on. I said, why so many? Well, we sent it to one distribution point, and it's one that's given to the CEO and every one of the directors, of the networks. But, I've gotten thousands of phone calls over the years from school teachers, college professors, and so forth. And the point I bring up, I'll use a school teacher, I'll say, if you pulled up your school district's budget report, and you pulled up your school district's CAFR, then you went to your class and said, well, class, and you ran an economic class or, whatever, finance, and you said, well, class, here's our school district's budget report, and here's our school district's annual financial report. Let's see if we can spot the differences. I tell them, you'd find your walking paper so damn fast you wouldn't know what hit you. Because the science is golden routine is essential to maintain. Now, if everyone listening to your, say, for example, your show was broadcast to every independent radio show in the world, okay, and we had 65 million listeners on this show this afternoon.
Hear.
Yes. And I put out the challenge, try to get your syndicated nightly talking head from the ABC, CBS, NBC, any of the networks to make open and simple conspicuous mention of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report with this very simple comment. Listeners, I've heard about the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. I'd like you all to look into it and get back to me with comments. Okay, claims. You're not saying anything. You're just telling the listeners to, or the viewers to look and get back to them with comment. You will not find one from Chicago, Miami, Boston, New York, not one from any of the networks, any Rush Limbaugh, anybody.
Well, let's put this out as a challenge to folks because, don't take Walter's or my word for it. Go call Rush Limbaugh. Go call into these shows and just immediately, don't wait because they have their little delay that, they like to, if they're going to cut you off, they like to do it, they got that 45-second delay. Talk about I'd like you to talk about the CAFR, sir. The CAFR shows this and this, but just start talking about the CAFR and see what happens.
Don't even say you'd like him to start talking because he'll say, well, I've never heard of that before. I'll have to look into it. He'll find a way just to skate around it. What you want to say specifically is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report is, the CAFR is government's, statement of net worth. I'd like you to ask your listeners to look into it and get back to you with comment. So now you're not putting any responsibility on him, whether he knows about it, doesn't know about it. All you're asking is for that talking head to ask his listeners to look and get back. And that breaches the silence is golden routine. You will not find Ted Koppel, 60 Minutes, 2020. You will not find ABC, NBC, Nightly News.
Hi, neighbor. Welcome again to this neighborhood. I'd like to show you something. You know what this is? Or maybe if I press this button. There are so many things to learn about in this world. And so many people who can help us learn. And so many people who can help us learn. Did you ever grow anything in the garden of your mind?
All right, folks, welcome back. Here with Walter Burien at CAFR1.com. Now, Walter, just real quick, you bring up a good point because, it's one thing to call a national or international radio or television show and try to be all challenging as anything. But if you actually show a little respect and say something that's very innocuous, what was it you wanted them to say?
To simply say that the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, please ask your viewers to pull it up, look at it, and get back to you with a comment. So now.
Did Walter cut out? Okay, I couldn't tell if that was me or Walter, actually. Of course Walter cut out. They want to silence Walter! Oh, Walter's been working real hard, actually, in the background. We're gonna be making some announcements, actually, with Walter here sometime soon, hopefully, but not yet. Again, when you try to actually call into the mainstream, it is pretty funny because you will be hung up on as soon as that word CAFR or Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. I mean, it is funny. I've been driving through states, just long drives, and I've called into local stations that are affiliated with the main networks, and they will hang up on me and not put it through. I'll tell you what, unfortunately, Walter is still not with us, apparently. Let's go to our calls. Looks like we have Mike in Kentucky. Mike, welcome to the show.
Well, I was going to try to offer him some little bit of reinsurance. I was at a wake for a relative who died, and a college graduate from accounting. She just graduated with some kind of an accounting master's of business administration or something. I said, gee, did they ever talk about the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report in class? And she said, yes, they did. And I said, well, have you read about how much government actually owns and it's outside of the budgetary process? And what do you think about all that? Did they ever talk about Walter Burien or Gerald R. Klatt? She said, yeah, they did. And Yeah, this was in a Kentucky university.
Walter, are you there? Did you hear that?
Oh, I've been kind of on this, and it's been considered a soapbox issue for a number of years. In fact, Wikipedia continued to try to delete, various editors continued to try to delete and modify and edit and tag the articles on the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report that I'd say Walter Burien had a hand in on writing, and I kept, for a number of years, trying to keep it on there, and somebody retitled it, and that got deleted, and I think there's an article up there now with a few references to some of the stuff in Kentucky that I observed, and as Walter pointed out, that once the exposure level started ticking up on this, they started changing some of their strategies around to hide assets and make it look like they were in debt by loaning each other money and floating bond issues and trying to make it look like they had ways to justify.
So important. Government borrows from itself all the time, constantly, and I wish people could grasp that that's where most of the debt is.
They use their own investment assets to fund their own debt.
Well, we had in Kentucky here in a scheme where all of the cities and counties formed an association to build an insurance scheme to where they could supposedly save money on insurance. Well, this thing ballooned wealth overnight, and the state newspaper in Lexington, one of the larger papers, the Herald Leader, or as I call it, the Herald Liberal, the Herald Leader, covered, oh my gosh, they had a $10,000 Christmas tree. Oh, goodness. They've built these opulent headquarters and stuff. They never talked about the assets of these entities, the Kentucky Association of Cities and Counties. They never mentioned what their total assets were.
Can I make a quick comment on that?
Sure.
Insurance? They call them self-insurance trusts. And what they do to build up a power base, they'll say, for example, the city paid out $250,000 in insurance claims. They'll do an actuarial projection saying, well, we may have to pay out $2 million. So they build up enough revenue in the account from the return to equal $2 million. So if they're using a 10% rate of return, that's $20 million they put aside. If they're using a 5% rate of return, they put $40 million aside. But say, for example, their actual insurance claims only turned out to be another $250,000. They don't adjust it because their intent is to build the power base, bigger, bigger, bigger.
And then that entity, the Association of Counties or Cities Insurance Scheme, can buy into the bonds that they float for the debt to make it look like their local government's in debt. The other thing, it's probably been about, 12, 14 years ago, I was at this meeting. A friend of mine worked outside of a city, and they were deducting from his payroll city taxes, and he went to a city council meeting, and I went there to watch what was happening, as a media, had my little press pass on, and sit there and, let him, they had, address, open comments time there and on the agenda. And he stood up there and told what was going on. He said, I don't think it's fair. I don't work in the city, yet you're deducting taxes. It's taxation without representation. And he gave us a little couple of minutes that they gave him. And then, of course, one of the council members, being the bad guy, says, son, I learned it at a early age. You have to pay your taxes. There's just no way around it. You have to pay your taxes.
That's what they said in Chicago regarding Al Capone.
Well, after he sat down, I got up and I addressed the council, and I said, as a member of the media, I would like to be put on the mailing list for the comprehensive annual financial reports, or I would like a formal letter stating where these things are published. As I understand, you have to make them public. About 6 weeks went by, and they sent me a one-page summary of the city budget. And that's all I ever got out of them. And that's got to be a violation of some kind of Open Records Act, isn't it?
Well, how big is that city? What's the population?
The entire county, I think, is 35,000. I think the city is maybe about 12,000. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, you may want to pull up Google and you put in the name of the county in quotes, county of, in quotes, and then put annual financial report in quotes and see what pops up.
See if they can find it published somewhere on the internet.
Because as a plausible deniability, what they've done, a lot of local governments, they'll put up the CAFR or the annual financial report. Difference between an annual financial report or annual financial statement and a comprehensive annual financial report is the comprehensive annual financial report will have a 10-year statistical section in the back. An annual financial statement or an annual financial report will be the same, but it won't have that statistical section, and they all have to follow the same accounting guidelines. So, I've had people go to a county and they'll say, I want my comprehensive annual financial report. They'll go to their court clerk, and the court clerk will say, I'm sorry, sir, we don't put out a comprehensive annual financial report. And he'd go back like 3 times and hear the same thing. So at one county I called and I talked to the court clerk. I said, you don't have a comprehensive annual financial report? No, sir, we don't have one of those. I said, do you have an annual financial report? Oh, yeah, we have one of those.
Well, the GASB, the General Accounting Standards Board, I think established and started
They created the standards they all have to comply with.
Way back in 1947, and they started phasing them in.
46 and 47, that was GFOA, Government Financial Officers Association.
They changed it, yeah.
And then GASB came in and took over.
Hey, Mike, you can also, what I've found sometimes is easier is to go to your local, your city library will have the city CAFR and the budget at the reference desk, so you can actually see the physical copy, and you'll find that nobody's ever actually checked it out. So it's at least the physical copy is there. Generally, if you can't find it with a search in the search engine, you can also go to the government website, and you can generally find it under publications.
Well, I'm known to talk about this.
The state auditor will also have a library from all local governments in the state.
This issue I've talked about for years, going back to the late 90s. And the last time a parade went through with the mayor, a guy shouted across I was there with my camera filming it, and the guy shouted across to some other business leader in the community that was the mayor, and he goes, this isn't in the budget. Because he knew I'd talked about that.
I think I hear music, but it's real low. Oh, there it is. All right, folks, we'll be back. Stay tuned. Thanks for the call, Mike.
Derivatives, quantitative easing, trade imbalances, recession, low GDP, nations close to collapsing, and subprime loans, foreclosed homes, and people's taxes spent to bail out too big to fail AAA banks again. Fear levels rising as a U.S. crash seems imminent, having smashed the debt ceiling of $14 trillion. Despite protests and clashes in Athens streets, the IMF imposed structurally unjust programs in Greece, where in fact the term economy entered our language from the Greek oikonomia, meaning household management. Well, how are we managing? Theories abound, but in practice, does anyone actually know what the hell's even happening?
All right, folks, welcome back. So, Walter, what happened, man? When was the last time you got your Skype crashed, huh?
Well, keep in mind, right when we were talking, I was being succinct and very clear on that point to ask your talking head from ABC, CBS, NBC on the TV, nightly news, morning news, to make the simple request of, well, I've heard the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report is our government's, showing of net worth, and I'd like our viewers to all pull up their city, county, state, school district CAFRs, look at them, and get back to me with comment. So you're not putting them on the spot, because if you said, what do you think of the CAFR? Well, I don't know about it. I'll have to look into it. You never hear from them again. Or, there's something going on here. Well, I don't know. I'll have to look into it. But by saying, please ask the viewers to pull up their city, county, and state and school district CAFRs, look at them, and get back to me with comment. If they refuse, which they all will, they can't say it. If they ask that one simple question, they'll be out in the street. They know it. And, by putting them on the spot like that, though, it qualifies the degree and the scope of the control exercised by the syndicated media for not a peep, not a mention, not a word. Okay, and it'll start registering in your brains, your neighbor's brains. If you the guy that runs the business down the street from you, if you brief him, I said, well, okay, fine. Call in to Sharon Walters, ABC News, who says, I'm for the people and protecting the people, whatever, every day. Say, have her ask the audience to look at the school district, state, city, county, CAFRs and get back to her with comment. And she'll refuse. Now, if I ask her that, she'll say that. And he calls up and asks, and nothing, silence. It's going to register in his brain, okay? The doubting Thomas. Damn. This must be big, and they have such a strong control over this. She wouldn't even say a word. And I'm a personal friend with her. I had her over for dinner. With my wife 3 times.
Let's go back to the phones. Let's get Jerry in Chicago. Jerry, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for taking my call. Real quick question. Is this something that could be brought up at a weekly town hall meeting?
It has many a times, and a lot of times the city council, county board of commissioners, they pull the old deer in the headlights routine. We'll look into it and get back to you, or we won't discuss that now. Let's set up a meeting, next week, and we'll discuss the issue. They try to avert and sidetrack.
And also, I think it's important to say that they don't deal with the CAFR. They only deal with the budget. They have a financial department that does all of their accounting, and some council members actually don't really understand. I've talked to them personally, council members around here that wanted me to explain their CAFR. So some of them don't know, but there's always one or two at least that are in the know. But keep in mind that their job is the budget, to deal with the budget. The budget is a very small part of the actual CAFR.
Well, they also go, most of the old-timers that have been on the city council, county board of supervisors, they go out of the way to go over the CAFR with a fine-tooth comb. State legislators, senators, congressmen, they go out of the way. I mean, I'll go back 14 years ago when I first started national CAFR disclosure. I got a call from a woman in Pennsylvania. She was a wealthy cattle rancher. And she called me up and she goes, well, I just told my good friend the congressman all about this CAFR thing, and I spent $240,000 to get him elected. And I told him about it, and he's absolutely furious. And he said he's going to get to the bottom of it. I said, oh, really? I said, I'm going to put you on hold. I just want you to listen. Don't say anything. So I did a conference call through to the mailroom Department of Treasury in Pennsylvania. We sent out the report, and I said, has Congressman so-and-so been getting the CAFR report? Oh, yes. For how long? 11 years. And I said, where'd you send it to his office? And she goes, yes. And then I loved her for qualifying this one point. She goes, oh, except for 3 years ago, he was vacationing down in the Bahamas, and he had his aide call us to have it sent to him down there so he didn't miss it. Well, I would have loved to have recorded the next call this woman had with her good friend, the congressman. You lying son of a bitch! I want my money back.
Jerry, what else you got, man?
If they refuse to give it to me, can is there another way that I could solicit this? And you're saying just check your local library?
Always do a Google first. What's the name of your city?
Hometown, Illinois.
Hometown, Illinois. Just put, it's the city or township of Hometown?
It's city.
Okay, put the city of Hometown in quotes, then put annual financial report in quotes. And if it's a comprehensive annual financial report, it'll pop right up. If it's an annual financial report, it'll pop right up. And if you don't get to hit there, put in annual financial statement in quotes. And it'll probably pop right up. And then do the same thing for your school district and your county. I've noticed a lot of times small towns and cities may not get a pull-up on Google, but the school district for the exact same area will pop up with their comprehensive annual financial report.
You can also search the government website. All cities have a website. And you can go in the publications section or search and sometimes find it there. Often they put it in the minutes as well. So it's just
in New Jersey, they just started I came across when I was looking for a school district in New Jersey, and I popped up with a state site. And they had every one of the school districts in New Jersey's annual financial report linked on one page.
Well, that must be nice. Jerry, anything else?
Okay, well, No, that's it. Thank you very much for taking my call. You guys have
Absolutely.
a blessed
Hey,
week.
don't forget the library, too. The library at the reference desk often will have it as well. In fact, I think they're required to. All right, man, let's real quick take John in Canada. I think that's going to be it.
Hey, Clint, Walter, I talked to you guys about 6 months ago. I was going to be writing an essay about the municipality that I live in. I got a hold of the CAFR and...
well, in Canada, it'll be the CAFR, CANFR.
Well, it came up. And what I discovered is that of a revenue base, like taxes, fines, sales, everything, $95 million, they have a surplus of $1.6 billion.
Yeah.
And I went in to look because, Walter, you had advised me to go and check the funds. And I couldn't get too deep into the funds, but what was staring me obvious in the face was that they had a future liability item to offset that, and it was for 30 years in a one-year report.
Yeah,
and it shaved off like a whole pile of that $1.6 billion.
Could you imagine if you got a call from the IRS? They said, you didn't pay your federal taxes this year. You said, well, I did a projection out 35 years on what my expenses will be. My expenses will be $17.8 million. I only brought in $85,000 this year, so that puts me 17-point-something million in the red.
Well,
so
that doesn't make sense.
I have a net loss, so I can't pay any taxes this year.
Yeah, but I want to thank you guys because, it opened my eyes because, as you say, Walter, this is worldwide. And they are pulling the same scam on every...
It's money and wealth. I mean, if you asked every person out there, if you knew a way to get the Powerball number the day before it's drawn, would you abuse your knowledge and play that Powerball number? I think 99% of the people, I'd play that Powerball number, especially if I knew it was the winner. You know, these guys are moving billions, if not trillions of dollars, with the public sitting there clueless, being entertained off in La La Land, and, they just continue to perpetuate the game. And, going back to what Clint mentioned earlier in the show regarding the TRFA, I'm working on setting up a structure where taxation is not needed. Everyone's on the same page for the first time.
I see. I totally see that because, even in the surplus without another nickel coming in, that's 17 years of taxes looked after. Regardless, how do you get into the funds? How do you get into the funds? How do you get them
to qualify what you're talking about, okay, it boils down to this one point. Governments were not supposed to operate at a profit. How did they get around that? If they made a $100 million profit in one area, one of their operations, all they have to do is create a liability account, projected out 5, 10, 15, 20, 35 years, take the $100 million profit, deposit it into the liability account, and poof, there goes a $100 million profit now designated as a liability. So you'll find all local governments have these liability accounts coming out the yin-yang. These are holding and parking grounds for what they're, pulling in.